Answer from the Lord to a Catholic theological writer. The Gospel of Nature and Mission of Man on Earth. January 22nd, 1872. Thru Gottfried Mayerhofer, Chapter 1. The Lord says, My dear son, you have written a long letter to your spiritual sister from the standpoint of your knowledge, to which she, as a woman, cannot answer you. And it was precisely in this predicament between not being able and nevertheless caring that she turned to my scribe, asking him to ask me for guidance and advice, so that whatever is appropriate may happen to you. This man is a learned Catholic theological writer. Well then, you say in your letter that you want an answer and an evaluation from a master. So I take it upon myself to enter into a theological dispute with you, so that you may recognize your master, who is able to answer your questions, as well as the questions of all living beings of all creation. But before I proceed to the actual content of your letter, I must first help you to clear up your doubts, whether this word that I am giving you here is not directly from me, but either only a human concoction or a word dictated under the influence of a higher spirit. Though you yourself confess in your own letter that not everything you write has grown on your own ground, even the light-filled, comprehensive, and newly revealed Great Gospel of John, which you have just read, this concoction you do not entirely accept as mine. You believe it to be for apprentices, not for those deeply initiated in the doctrine of God, as you call it. It is too sweet, at most written for children, laymen, and immature people, but not for men. Here you are greatly mistaken. And to correct this error in you, and to establish the truth that everything that you have just now read is only from me and from no one else, this shall be my first action, whereupon the approach to your long letter will follow, to also shine for you as the morning sun, which shall guide you through the material life to the spiritual heaven. Behold, my son, in you lives a spirit which elevates your soul above the animal soul. It elevates you to a free man, while the animal is led towards its destiny by the bonds of instinct. This spirit, a spark from me, which I breathed into the first man according to Moses, and through which I created man, apart from his outward appearance, according to my own image. It is this spirit who is the mediator between myself, my spiritual kingdom, and man. By means of this spirit, I speak to man in his heart. I admonish, advise, and comfort him as something that cannot be denounced, despite of some aversion, which is why you call it conscience, because it is something certain. Through this voice, I announced my will to the prophets in the Old Testament. And it is through this very voice that I now direct and guide mankind to its close destination, to the examination. For the time has come when the wheat will soon be cleansed of the chaff, as indicated by the great political, secular, and spiritual upheavals that are manifesting on your entire earth. For this purpose of my direct communication, a man of simple character, who had become more accustomed than many others to listening to his inner voice, also served me, who learned to distinguish the fantasy images of his brain from my voice of love, and so was able to put everything that is intended on paper, not only for the small circle of readers who now know these writings, but for the whole of humanity, as the future system of religion, based solely on my own statements during my earthly visit, which is to lead the cultural affairs and the whole teaching system back to the way I once gave to my apostles, simple men of the people. Because you can well imagine that I did not descend to your earth in vain and gave you the example of greatest humiliation and sacrifice. This communication to men and women devoted to me has always been repeated at certain intervals after my departure. There have always been many such clairvoyants. The messages left by them, of course, have always been appropriate to the time and understanding of the people living within them, so that their language differed from one another in different centuries. Even with you, the books, which are especially intended for children, are written in a different style than those which, perhaps even dealing with the same subject, are written for adult men. If the people were in their infancy, they would receive children's tales and stories, behind which the true wisdom was concealed. And if the people were in manhood, they would receive proclamations appropriate for a brighter spirit. But it was always one and the same source. It was always my direct communication, which was slowly affecting men, preparing them from one level to the next. In the present time, after the aforementioned scribe had been recalled by me, I have again chosen another one for myself, who possesses the qualities to benefit me and mankind through these communications. Through this new scribe, you receive these lines here. Because of your qualities and your zealous search for light, I not only want to make my will known to you, but also limit your learnedness and staunch your theological and philosophical studies into a certain limited riverbed, and by the regulation of your life's course, lead you back to the sea of eternal light, happiness and bliss. Behold, you have quoted many passages from the Old and New Testament to justify your spiritual direction and your personal view. And thus I shall begin with a saying from my walk on earth as well, which fits best here in particular. And the first and most important is, if you do not become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Behold, this saying is the first I entrust to you for your consideration. Become a child and leave the adult's food aside. Abide by the simplest, and don't look far away for what is so close to you. Behold, you have quoted the Trinity, the story of creation, the personality of Christ, his birth, and many other things from the ancient fathers of the Church. You have quoted these explanations, which were often quite perceptive, as evidence of the only theme, namely the divinity of Christ, the existence of God, his spirit realm, and many more. When you read these explanations in the ancient books of the Church Fathers, they seemed witty, quite true. And why? Because they complied with the laws of your mind. But I have to tell you that all these old writers and elucidators of my word, both of the Old and the New Testament, were only woodworms, as it were, who penetrated through the rough and material shell of the tree of life, having buried themselves inside of it, because they suspected that something better, something finer, still lies behind and underneath this shell. And they too, like the woodworms, the further they penetrate into it, the more spiritualized they themselves become through the ever finer nourishment. But they fared like the woodworms of a tree. They could not reach too high into the tree, because the food no longer appealed to them. And so, all research and explanations in general were always from the same sphere. The doubts of a searching soul did not completely brighten, and the seekers only drifted around in circles, around a center that everyone suspected was there, but no one was able to reach it. But since I start from completely different views and see further than all the interpreters of the Bible, I will advise you to read my own book, namely, the book of my visible and invisible nature, instead of opening another book of a prophet or an old church father. In my book, I will show you what you want to prove with Bible explanations, where you can always find it anew, that I, God, am the love, that my Son is wisdom, and that the Holy Spirit is the connection of both, for the execution of creation. See, my child, I created the whole universe with all its living beings, because I, as love itself, wanted to be loved by others. For love in itself, without an object to love, is an impossibility. So, my love, this unlimited divine love that cannot be grasped by you creatures, created beings and worlds, great material and spiritual realms, where intelligent beings, rejoicing in the creations, learn to love the Creator, and thus, in this way, should return my love to me. This unlimited divine love also had to have a purpose, a why, and up to here and no further. And this limiting factor was wisdom. Thus, love paired with wisdom were the factors that matured the ideas for creation, and the spirit of preservation crowned the work with the stamp of infinity, because what a God created must also be divine, and what an infinite being called into being will also be infinite. Thus, the great Trinity was founded, which always expresses itself in the material visible through three things as well, as length, width, and thickness, or form, content and density, or, as in the case of the human spirit, soul and body, and in every created thing, an outer, inner, and innermost. This Trinity pays homage to everything, all products of the earth, both in and outside of it. Love, then, was the one who created everything, preserved everything, and perfected everything. Without this love, no sun would be shining. Without love, there would be no warmth, no life. It is the force that drives everything to achieve its goal. See my whole creation, where you want to look at a product. May you recognize from its perfection in the smallest as well as in the greatest, that the Creator, always remaining constant, embraces everything with equally loving arms. Fly up into those spaces where millions of years are not enough to send you a ray of light from there, or descend to the smallest atoms in the infinite ether, and you will find the same loving Creator. Behold, your small Earth orbits around the Sun. This one, with all its planets and comets, orbits around another, larger, in union with other solar systems. This central Sun, with its entourage, again around a larger, and so on until the whole world system is filled, ordered as it is partially revealed to you in the night sky. Just as this big starry firmament constitutes only one system for itself, so there are still millions of them, of which you know some under the name nebulae. If you now follow these worlds of stars and continue to discover new ones, you will, in the end, come upon another realm, where all these former entities have their spiritual counterparts, and where, little by little, the whole of creation, always spiritualizing, will finally transform into this realm to create a new cycle of creations, but only spiritual ones. Well, in that spiritual kingdom, where everything finds itself in its highest potency, there is also my seat. From there, I reign. From there, I send my Son, the wisdom, down to this small grain of sand, so that he may serve all spirits and beings as an example of what love can do, when it acts as a high and great purpose. Ignoring all other suns and worlds, where humans of, to you, unimaginable greatness in spirit and physical powers live in a world full of miracles. My own divinity had to descend to the greatest humiliation and carry out this humiliation on a star that is smaller than a grain of sand in the sea, and whose inhabitants carry within them the greatest spirit in physical expansion, just as with you, where the nerve is able to run out into the smallest tips, where it is nonetheless capable of the greatest feelings, be it bliss or pain. I once descended onto this dark earth, as divine wisdom, as a teacher, deprived myself of all that is divine, began as a little child in the most meager position, and finished this way of life through the most dishonorable death on the cross. And all this out of love, in order to show my spirits what a spiritual being must do if it ever shall be like me. I came to your earth to proclaim, as you yourself say, the dawn of a coming new day, the day of love, the day of peace and reconciliation, the day of my divine spark that was placed within you. Understand this self-sacrificing love without any ulterior motives. Consider it so that your heart may be widened as well, spreading over all mankind, and letting you only see straying children in your fellow men. May this love warm you and be the basis for all your actions. Then you will be reborn again. You will again be a child, who, trusting in his Father, accepts all that may come from him, because he knows that the Father does not punish, does not take revenge, but only forgives and forgets. Consider me to be an eternally loving God, a gentle and humble Jesus. Follow my footsteps, and you will discover the voice of this love everywhere in material nature. With the warm ray of sunlight, with the gentle whispering of a mild spring breeze, and with the ray of light from millions and millions of miles away that strikes your eye. Everything will tell you one and the same thing. God is love. On your walks, the birds in the air and the flowers of the earth will call out to you. May you become what we are, the creatures who fulfill their purpose perfectly. Once this love permeates your breast, when you have understood the great word of my love for you, then spread out your arms towards the whole world. Everything will seem rosier, more peaceful to you. You will discover harmonies where previously you hardly perceived individual notes. Reborn, you will see me and your fellow human beings in a completely different light. Because the book of my creation has become legible, comprehensible to you. Only then will you realize that you already carried this image of love in your own breast beforehand, but could simply not understand and interpret it yet. Then you will probably leave your church fathers alone. You will always remember their aspirations with honor, but they will not be able to suppress my book of life. And why did I create all of nature? Why did I endow it with so many charms? It is precisely so that through it, my children learn to respect me, the giver, to firstly regard me as creator, and then to love me as Father. See how a dewdrop on a leaflet reflects the whole world surrounding it. In the same way, your inner being should reflect the whole harmony of my creation through the heavenly peace that resides within you. And then you will feel what it means. Everything is pure to the pure. So, equipped with this great love for your fellow human beings, take care of the souls of the people entrusted to you. In this sense, become a minister. In this sense, if you offer your sacrifice of the Mass to me, the Dominus Nobiscum, the Lord be with us, and Pax Nobiscum, peace be with us, Then you will become a true blessing for your community, if you have also taught them to develop the spiritual from the material and the practical life, and thus to improve themselves. So, you are standing in the right place as a priest, as a worker in my vineyard, and I will reward you in the same measure and weight, just as all those whom you will lead to me. That is to say, they will all find the Father, the loving Jesus, as Savior in me, who will take away their burden and heal their wounds. So, take my world as the great gospel. See in it how, through my love, everything is wisely arranged, how everything there is destined to show man as the ultimate goal of all creations on every earthly, solar body and comet, in the smallest as well as in the greatest. My love, my wisdom, and my creative spirit, who created all these miracles in order to awaken, among the intelligent thinking beings, the same impulse that constitutes the single self in the Creator and Lord of all creatures. Out of love I created these worlds, so that through the understanding of what has been created, this love returns to me again. Look, the great tree of life, like the tree visible to you on your earth, has its roots in the material. There, as with any other tree, the root seeks to extract from the surrounding soil what is necessary to build its own individuality. This absorbed energy conducts the soul of the tree upwards, from darkness to light, from cold to warmth, from the coarse to the finer, lighter, earthly air. The higher these juices rise, are processed in the bark, in the cell tissue, the more they leave what's solid behind, the more they push the finer forward, the more the influence of the earth recedes, and the more powerful influence of light, air, and heat asserts itself. The products of this process become ever finer, ever lighter. Everything pushes forward to the closer, more direct influence of the substances from my heavens. The wood of the trunk is already softening in the branches. The preparations for the development of the leaf, the blossom, and the final goal, the fruit, are being accelerated. Everything emerges from the other. When it has become the fruit, having reached its destination, it then has to begin a similar cycle for other purposes and in different forms, by means of metabolism, in order to reach another, even more spiritual level. And just as the entire plant kingdom travels this path, so too does the human soul travel in its own way, the same path, should it ever want to reach me. It too is to absorb the spiritual from ordinary life, matter, to refine and spiritualize it, to always ascend upwards, to the blossom, to the fruit, so that it too, when the time of its trial life is over, it can easily, under different circumstances, begin the next and even greater journey in the hereafter. If you wanted to contemplate my nature with spiritual eyes, how many hints and spiritual correspondences you would see there to what I have actually destined the material world, and by extension, to what I have destined you human beings. Everything that you see physically in nature is spiritually expressed in the course of life of humanity, of the peoples, and of every individual. In nature, you see the struggle for light, for freedom, for perfection. You see emergence and decay, eternal metabolism, eternal struggle. You see always a spiritual result emerging from material destruction. Humanity, since its beginning, has followed the same path as the sap of a tree, from night to light. And so it was its cultural movement, its spirit stage cycle, that made them ready to prepare my descent and make it necessary. Thus, mankind, between origin and decay, between struggle, defeat and victory, moves forward towards victory, towards the goal for which I have created it. Thus, the nations, each according to its spiritual maturity, down to the individual, traverse between joys and sufferings, between wrong and right views, between delusion and truth. Even my own short walk of life on earth was like this, between contempt, struggle and suffering, between revenge, hate and persecution, always being the banner of spiritual freedom and the divine dignity of man. Lifting high above all the calamities of earthly life, I sealed my mission with my glorious resurrection. I cried on the cross to men and nations, "It is done," which only had value and meaning to me, in that I had to leave their own accomplishment to themselves in the future, but nonetheless supporting them in their endeavor to do so. And as I had to go through all these bitter battles throughout my years of apprenticeship, and carried my cross willingly, so too men, each one for themselves, and all of them together, must now also be led to victory and glorious resurrection through battles and suffering. Consider the current world events, the confusion of opinions in religious terms. Everything is pressing for purification, for certainty. Everything wants to go from night to light. So you too shall learn to read in my great book. Learn to recognize that everywhere in the material and spiritual realm, there is only one law and one goal, which pushes forward all that has been created. It is the goal to gain spiritual value from everything that one does, sees, speaks, and experiences, and to refer everything to me, because everything came from me alone, and everything wants to return to me. You have built prayer houses for your God. There you have introduced a ceremonial cult, in whose way this God should be worshipped. Learn now to recognize from my words to you that I am not in those prayer houses, not in those ceremonies, if you do not bring me there in your hearts. My house of prayer is the whole of creation, which, without wanting to, always calls out to you. God is love. So as soon as man has learned the language of my nature, he will also appear in a house specifically built for praying with more devotion, and not for the sake of habit. Even the priest celebrating Mass will perform his own function as a messenger more devoutly when he remembers the Creator, who lavishes 1,000 graces on him with every breath. The priest will understand only then what responsibility he bears, to bring his subordinates forward spiritually. He will, knowing my love in its entirety, often look up to me with shame when his hopes are not realized in the most beautiful and sincere desire of the soul, the desire to only want the best. He alone knows that what I said as a man in the Garden of Gethsemane must also apply to him. He too must call out, "Not mine, but thy will be done, O Lord." The renunciation that lies in these words will give him back his confidence in me and strengthen his consciousness. For he knows the love which manifests itself in all of nature and only brings blessings, even in destruction and annihilation, in misery and misfortune. This love cannot waver, cannot fail. And when he raises his gaze to the starry sky in the evening after laborious work, when he sees these thousands upon thousands of flames of love floating in the great ether like light drops of oil on water, when this immense book of my great creation shows itself, then when he, crushed by this greatness, is forced to shout, "Lord, what am I that you remember me?" then I lower the beam of silence into his heart by answering him, "You are and shall become my child, child of this great Creator. Therefore, open your heart, expand it so that the thought of my creation, the thought of my infinite love, finds its place therein. You too spread out your arms, Embrace everything created spiritually. Everything is a product of my love. Everything has at least one spark of myself within it. Honor my creation. Doing so, you honor me as well, and yourself. Let this all-embracing love enter into your heart. Let this great thought of the universal take a seat in your heart, and you will see clearly all that lies veiled in clear language, in the parable or in veiled correspondence, in the Old and New Testament. You will see it standing before you with eternal indelible letters in all that is created, and even in your own self, and you will be able to read within yourself again and recognize what all of these many words actually mean. Namely, God is love. Out of love, He created you, and through love, He wants to lead you back to Him. Consider this and become a child, my child. This is your task, which I have given you to solve as a trial on this earth. Amen.